In this episode of OG55, we are joined by Danny, Just As Danny from Five Fires and his own YouTube channel, Just As Danny. We are going to talk all about the Esplanade at the Disneyland Resort. It's an issue. We're going to talk about what Disney could possibly do with it, what is maybe going to happen. We're also going to dive into Disneyland Forward, speculate on what could possibly come to either park or both parks now that it's been officially approved. I also got George the Italiano with us up next on OG 55. Welcome aboard, everybody, to another episode of OG 55. Before we dive into our topics, I want to introduce my fantastic panel. We got Danny. Welcome back, Danny. It's always fun having you on the show, sir.
Hey, I'm happy to be back. It's we have a good discussion today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's something that I feel like with the Esplanade in particular, is something that I feel like not a lot of people in our community are really bringing up. And it is kind of like this elephant in the room situation. So it'd be really fun to dive into that. But yeah, if you could just remind everybody where they can find you on social media, YouTube, all that good stuff. And I'll be linking it down below as well.
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel called JustAskDanny. So you can find me there, try to do updates at the park as often as I can, mainly just the Disneyland Resort. And then I also have a podcast called the 5571 podcast, also covering what's new and what's happening at the Disneyland Resort. And I also am a regular guest host on Mondo's Five Fires YouTube channel for his weekly speculation, whatever day it ends up landing on. Speculation Sunday.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. Sometimes it's Speculation Sunday, but sometimes it'll land like on a Monday or, just kind of depending. But they do great work over there. And Danny does great work on his YouTube and all that good stuff. So make sure you follow and show them all the love. And over here, we got Mr. Italiano. How you doing, George?
Doing good. As Danny has said, we got some juicy topics to discuss tonight, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could let everybody at home know, George, where they can find you on social media.
Absolutely. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There we go. Let's dive in. Okay, so the Esplanade. Okay, now this is interesting, right? This is like really people's like kind of like what like their first impression going into either park, whether it's Disneyland or DCA, and it's been looking kind of rough, and not just recently. I mean, this has been going on for a few years now with the various tiles, the memory tiles where people have like their names etched in them and stuff. A lot of the emblems are like chipping and coming out. You can see here, it just doesn't look great. I'll start with you, Danny. Like, what's going on with the Esplanade? And do you think Disney has maybe some plans for this to kind of rework this area?
Yeah, I mean, I think not that long ago, right, we had Ken Potrock say that Downtown Disney was going to go through an 18-month transformation. I think we're going to be passing that 18th month period just because they've had a little bit of delays with construction, with weather and stuff like that over in Southern California. But I always felt like that transformation, seeing as how what we've seen already looks like it's really changing the face of Downtown Disney to a more like modern, really kind of like Disney Springs-esque look, right, of a shopping center. The Esplanade just doesn't really fit anymore. So I always felt like that was going to be the culmination, the end, like redo announcement right after Downtown Disney was done. And it makes sense, right? They teased 2 years ago that Portos Bakery would be coming at D23. We're now approaching the next D23 and still no Portos Bakery. No sign of it coming. And that kind of sits partially in the Esplanade. So I almost wonder if maybe that got delayed because Disney wanted to bring their Esplanade plans to the forefront and start doing that right away. So, but you're right. It is the first impression that people have of the resort. And it's from the early 2000s, even like probably 1999 when they built it, 1998. And it's not the best look anymore.
Yeah, no, well said, well said. What do you think? What do you think, Italiano?
I definitely agree. And quite recently, I kind of have been noticing the Esplanade kind of in comparison to when I went to Epcot when they had the Leave a Legacy entrance right
Right.
before Spaceship Earth, or as I like to call it, the graveyard. Um,
R.I.P.
yes. And again, it was like that first impression, like when you walked into Epcot, you saw the Spaceship Earth, but then you saw all these kind of like monuments, kind of like plaques and stuff, and it just felt very out of place. Where I feel like the Esplanade is not moving forward as of right now, along with the rest of the resort. It feels very dated. It feels very kind of Paul Pressler era kind of feel, if you will, kind of like the early 2000s. Um, but I definitely feel like if and hopefully if this is included with like the Disneyland Forward of like changing things up because they're going to have to move the security checkpoints and what have you. So it's like if they're going to have to do all that anyway, let's do like a major update to the Esplanade. I would like for it to have like a kind of like a not necessarily like Disney Springs, but just have that like Disney Springs kind of vibe. Maybe like put like a fountain, like
Yeah.
maybe in the center or something. Kind of give like new brickwork, new tile, new something, and especially with all these ticket booths that are completely unnecessary that we don't need anymore.
Well, yeah, and Danny, you brought that up actually when we met up at the parks a couple weeks ago, where it's like they have all these ticket booths sitting there, and it's like a waste of space now. I mean, in the time that we live in, a lot of stuff is now done, via the app or the website or whatever. You think there's going to be some movement with these ticket booths? Maybe get rid of not all of them, but a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, even each park, right? I don't know if you're if you think about it, outside each park, there is sort of like a ticket booth window to the left or to the right of each park, respectively. Back in the day, when Disney California Adventure first opened, it was like the lost and found kind of like guest relations area outside California Adventure, and then Disneyland had their own version of it too. And then over the years, those windows were used for different things like group sales, and then one became lost and found for the whole resort, and it just kind of like switched throughout the years. But there's no saying that those areas couldn't be repurposed for the little bit of ticket needs they have in person now. And then the ticket booths completely gone and got rid of. I mean, like George was saying, it's very Pressler era. They're very dated, old looking. I think the first photo you brought up that had the Pixar Fest banners on them, that harkens back to the original look of Downtown Disney when it was themed to a garden.
Right.
And see the leaves on the top there that like are supposed to be like plants and stuff like that. But even on the floor, the cement design, there are leaves, and like you can't really tell it unless you know to look for it. And if you look at it from Google Earth or Google Maps, you can see it still in some of the older areas of Downtown Disney. But there was like the whole entire theme of Downtown Disney was a giant garden, and each section was like different sections of a garden. So like the area where Tortilla Joe's was like the bird of paradise section, and there's still like light posts in there that have like fake birds of paradise all in them. And then the planters themselves, if you ever notice, they're kind of unique in Downtown Disney. They all have like they're shaped like leaves, and so they all kind of grow off of a vine, and the vine was traveling through Downtown Disney in the cement. And they've lost all that, and especially over by the monorail station. The monorail station had a gigantic leaf covering the whole
Right.
thing.
Like
And
that
they
archway, right?
yeah, and it's a giant leaf, and it still is a giant leaf. They just painted it blue, and they didn't take away the plant theme at all. So, but they did remove all of the plant motifs from the ground. So, of course, the ground areas they've been working on that over this last year very heavily. All the ground areas there are mid-century modern, like Palm Springs vibe that match like the hotel's new theme, right? And so we kind of see that creeping its way through Downtown Disney. And so truly the Esplanade maintaining this like garden theme is so off for the rest of the resort. It doesn't match anything.
Yeah.
So it's kind of bizarre at this point. It's like very haphazard and put together all weird. So
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Danny. And aesthetically, it looks very, like you said, like you guys were saying, very dated. It doesn't match anymore because the whole aesthetics of Downtown Disney now is changing. And then even like logistically, operationally, you would think that they would want to rework this area because you could really open things up. Once you get rid of those ticket booths now, that's a lot more space that you can have people queued up and things like that. It just, at every single angle, it just makes sense to redo this area. Now, you think that maybe D23 they might say something? You think that maybe we'll get some sort of official like, hey, this is what we're going to do with this area?
I think so. I mean, they've already kind of started teasing it. They mentioned that they're going to be working on new turnstiles, right? And we have a new section of those turnstiles in place already at Disney California Adventure Park. And so those turnstiles are what's already in place at Disneyland Paris. So if Disney's going to be making any sort of change um, to like the main entrances of the park, I would imagine they would wait to do all of it together. And so I feel like, with just a couple months away from D23, there's certainly something there. I think someone mentioned earlier a fountain. Like the fountain's like the best like idea that we like everyone's always thrown out there for the Esplanade. And you think of like Tokyo Disney Sea or like Disneyland Paris or something like where they have these really nice like common areas in between like outside their parks. And Disneyland's like just never really had that. It sometimes, as you know, by going into the like the Esplanade area, it can be like completely full of people with lines from each park. But with these new turnstiles, that's supposed to be eliminated. So I don't
Nice.
know.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. And a fountain would definitely kind of like break things up a little bit, look really nice. I know, I think it's Hong Kong Disney that has like a pretty cool fountain. It's like Steamboat Willie kind of
Yeah.
vibe. Something like that would be really cool for Disneyland, I think. What do you think, George? You think they're gonna announce something at D23 for Esplanade? Make it official?
I would hope so. I would think that, especially with Disneyland Forward, moving forward, no pun
Yeah.
intended. That obviously they're going to have some things to kind of fill in the gaps, because right
Right.
now they can't make any official announcement of things that is actually going to be utilized for the expansion pads, because as of right now they're still parking lots and they can't take the parking lots out until they get the Eastern Gateway project moving, and they have to do the rezoning and everything. So, they're going to make that announcement obviously at D23, but at the same time, with everyone that's going, the fans aren't going to want to sit there and hear, okay, about rezoning. It's like
Right.
they want to hear some factual changes coming to the resort. And I
Some
think,
project.
yeah, and I think the Esplanade would be a nice breath of fresh air, I think, to kind of say, kind of like revitalize like basically the main entrance, because you're not talking about just the entrance to Disneyland or to Downtown Disney or to DCA. This is the entrance for the whole entire resort. This is the first thing that's representing the Disneyland Resort, and especially if Disney's long-term plan is to create a vacation destination for Disneyland, just like how they did with Walt Disney World. You want to kind of appease those families, those travelers, give them something to kind of look forward to. And I think, like, for newbies, especially if they're coming out for maybe a week, once Disneyland Forward gets up and running, you want to give them something that they could actually look at and say, wow, this is phenomenal, this looks great.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned, George, that on that bus load unload area, right?
Mhm.
They're gonna have to redo that security entrance because that's where the Eastern Gateway is gonna spill over into, right? And they want to use that space too for theme park expansion, that bus load unload area. So that whole area needs to be reworked eventually to get all that in there, right?
Eventually, yeah, that whole section is going to have to be changed and rerouted and moved somewhere else on the property.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. What do you think about that, Danny? How's that gonna work? Because but the first go at this thing, I think it was like 2017-ish or 2018-ish, where they try to do the Eastern Gateway, and there was a bridge, and the businesses were upset because it was gonna bypass them. Now, I guess they work something out with those local businesses. I might have missed it. I don't know. Did they ever release a like an alternative plan that they're gonna go through with now, or are we still kind of not really sure how they're gonna work that?
Yeah, they did. They released updated concept art in the Disneyland Forward committee meetings that they had with the community
Okay.
leading up to the vote. It was pretty like plain looking. It looked very similar to like what the Pixar Palace parking structure looks like. Um, and with like the escalator, like little tunnels going down and all that kind of stuff. I think the difference here is that like George was saying, the bus transportation zone would be located there. So that's like the big difference. So that would be like not only a hub for people who are parking there, but like for the local community, the bus stops, and for all those guests that are staying in those harbor hotels, they would also be utilizing that structure for their entrance into Disneyland. Because if they're going to be going over some sort of bridge, at that point they'll already have gone through security. So it's just like Mickey and Friends, where you go through security at the structure before you get on the tram. It's the same thing. So it's going to be there's not going to be like a true walkway off the street if that plan was to go through for that parking structure.
And even for like just safety reasons, I think that's such a good way to do it, because that whole harbor side gets crazy with all these families trying to cross the street and stuff like that. And so now if you can take that traffic off the street and get it through that bridge, I think it's just safer for everybody. So that's gonna be interesting. So let's dive into some Disneyland Forward, because it is tied to this. Oh, go ahead, George. I'm sorry.
But before we do, I just have a question, because this is where I'm kind of curious about. So if anyone who is staying at one of like the Disney Good Neighbor hotels that is
Right.
off of Harbor, which that's what I do usually.
Yeah.
So if I'm walking down Harbor, and if the bridge or the new crossing path is going to be to the opposite side across the street, but if I'm like walking straight down Harbor, it's going to be kind of horizontal of like the bridge as I'm looking at it. Would I then have to cross over to the street, walk around to then get onto the bridge, or would there be like a entranceway onto the bridge from that side of Harbor?
Well, if they're following the old plan, you would have to get to the structure. So you would have to follow the walkways, most likely off of Disney Way, which is that street that the Toy Story buses come in off of. And there'd be some sort of walkway entrance on that side into the structure. And so that you could go through security. And then after security, that's when you could go to the area where you get to the pedestrian bridge. So you couldn't get on the pedestrian bridge unless you went through security.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
OG, make a mental note to pick a hotel over by that area, so it's not a pain in the ass for me to circle all the way back around.
Right. No, exactly. Exactly. So here's the thing, right? Because that whole bus load unload area, there's a lot of rumors with that. I've heard everything from that's where Avatar is going to go, right? They're going to expand, Hollywood Land into that bus area, and it might be a Pandora thing. It's interesting. Danny, what do you think? What do you think is coming to? Because they definitely want to use that load area and expand DCA. What do you think is going there? You think it might be this Pandora expansion, or you think it might be like a Zootopia thing, or what's your prediction?
It could be. Like the likelihood of that becoming Pandora seems pretty high. It could fit really well into Disney California Adventure. They need a ride like that to really kind of have the draw to bring people in. It could be their flight of passage, right? For like how well flight of passage was for Animal Kingdom, it could be the same. And so I could see that. I could see Zootopia too. We don't someone mentioned earlier. We don't really. We're not going to be using any of those spaces like around the hotel. I don't feel like anytime soon. those are not ready yet for any sort of expansion. So, and that's really the only place you can expand Disneyland itself, other short of like taking away something that's in the park already.
Right.
And the first thing I think of, and a lot of people thought of in the past, is okay, let's take away Autopia and the submarines. But Disney just spent like probably millions of dollars just redoing the submarines not that long ago, and the Autopia has already gotten an article in some green newspaper about how it's changing to electrification in 2026. So we already know that those attractions are getting monetary like updates, so they're probably not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's truly the only place that could really get something like George was saying, fast, like right away, like that they could do immediately. And it would be kind of a mess, like for getting in and out of the resort, at least from that side, especially from like the Toy Story lot. But we've done it before, right? We had a whole over a year entering DCA through a small gate next to World of Disney.
Yeah.
So,
And that was exciting time. Like I know for like the normies, it was probably like the biggest pain in the butt. But I love that whole DCA era. Just watching that park transform was so much fun. Like as a diehard Disney nerd, it was just so much fun to watch that whole thing happen.
yeah.
I ended up getting $75 out of it.
You did. You want to tell that story? That was kind of interesting.
Yeah. So it was. So it was like my second or third day going into DCA where they had like all the walls up, everything was blocked. Like as soon as you like walk through the entrance, you couldn't see nothing. You were like going through this labyrinth of walls. And then as soon as you got onto the close to the pier, there was more walls, for Cars Land and what have you. So when I was coming into DCA for the entrance, they had someone standing by, like the people that do like the surveys and everything. So one kind of motioned over to me and I thought, okay, well, I'll just do the survey, probably take a couple minutes. And they said, we know your time is valuable, but we're actually getting a group of people. We want to get your insight on the construction walls, like the maneuvering of guest flow and what have you. They said it would probably take about like an hour and a half, and but we will pay you for your time. Well, that's all they had to say to me, and I'm like, okay, yeah, fine. So there was a small group of us, about I'd say like 6 or 7 people. They took us through the backstage area over by, I believe it was Hollywoodland, by the Hyperion, and we went into this like little conference room. They had a one-way mirror and then a camera that linked up to like they said these
George,
big executives.
George, are you sure you didn't get arrested? That's what this sounds like. Well, no, I'm just kidding.
Well, it did actually look. It looked like something like straight out of NCIS or something, or Criminal Minds. But they said, the camera was linked to the executives. They said either in Glendale or Burbank, and they were asking us all questions of how we felt about the construction and like what was coming to DCA and what have you, and yeah, it was a nice time. But yeah, they paid us $75 for like the hour and a half, and yeah, so and I went on my merry way. I'll never forget it. It came in a little envelope, a pink and white envelope with Tinkerbell on it.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's wild. That's actually pretty good amount too. $75.
Yeah, it was a 50, a 20, and a 5.
You got it all down, right, George? So okay, so it's interesting. So Disneyland, you're right, Danny. Like, there's really nowhere to go except for maybe that Stitch parking lot. Inside the park is like you got to really work with stuff. You got to get rid of Autopia, which is not going to happen right now with the electric vehicles. You got to reroute maybe like the monorail track, which I heard is very expensive. People mover track, all this good stuff. So, is it kind of safe to say that like DCA is probably going to be the first thing on the list for them? For this whole thing?
Yeah, if they're using that bus transportation plaza, it seems like the most likely spot, right? I think the big push now for us content creators and talking about Disneyland Forward, I kind of mentioned it in my podcast, but we need to like just delete the name Disneyland Forward. It was just a fancy name that like Disney came up with to, you know, help push the narrative with the community to like move Disneyland forward. But like, I think what it's done is it's done a little bit of damage in the sense that everyone thinks that Disneyland Forward is one giant project that's starting tomorrow.
Right.
Correct.
And it's not. It may never even happen. It's like it could never happen. They just wanted the option to do it, right? And they want to have the ability to do it. And so I think that's where we like think about it. And when you think about it in that way, it's like, yeah, these spaces next to the hotels, they could build stuff there, but will it be happening in the next 5 years? Probably not, since there's not parking available to take away that parking. I would certainly say, though, it would happen first, more likely for Disneyland side than DCA side, because the Disneyland side, you have like the Stitch parking lot, like you said, you have the former Downtown Disney parking lot, which is just cast member parking that truly could be moved to another location. And then you have like the parking lots surrounding the Disneyland Hotel, which those could also be quickly made into like a structure that fits that resort. So I feel like if any of those pads are to be used first, I would say the Disneyland side seems the easiest, because the Simba parking lot is like such a big thing to get rid of. Like that's a huge thing. So
Yeah. No.
Plus, the Stitch parking lot is used for the cast members, correct?
Yeah.
So you think that would be a more easier transition to kind of maneuver the cast members somewhere to utilize that parking lot?
When I worked there, the Simba parking lot, I worked at the hotels. So the Simba parking lot is right there next to the hotels. And we shared the parking lot with guests, which, you know, and that was truly, we didn't need to, right? We could have parked at like the big cast member parking lot and then bust into like our specific areas, but Disney let the cast members park there who worked in downtown Disney and in the hotels because it's just closer for them. But it's easier for Disney to like bus in their cast members than it is to like bus in guests and try to get them closer. So I feel like it'd be much easier for them to move them away, because it's just, I think the only people that park there are the vendors that work in downtown Disney. So
now, Danny, let me ask you, Ken Potrock mentioned in one of the console meetings, when he was up on the podium, when they were asking him questions, he said, you know, we know what we want and where we want to put it. Do you feel that was more just at the time strategy, or do you feel like he truly knows exactly where he wants everything to kind of go? And obviously, and as time goes on, things change, you know, plans maneuver. But I mean, do you think in his mind he has like a set based plan, or do you feel like just in that moment it's kind of like, you know, using the strategy to kind of get, you know, the people, you know, to kind of see what he wants to do, but maybe not entirely have it down on paper, so to speak?
Yeah, I think I do think that they have some sort of idea, and I think he means like more so they know, okay, we want this franchise, and this franchise for this park, and this franchise for the other park. And we have these spaces now, so now we just have to figure out how those fit in and how much of it we use. I think that's kind of like where they're at. I don't necessarily know that they know exactly what it is they want. In the vague concept art, they were just kind of showing an example of like what could be, so the city could like better gauge what it might look like if that wasn't a parking lot anymore.
Yeah, especially if they want that Toy Story Land.
Oh yeah, I was telling George they better not do Toy Story Land. And actually, it's a cute land. It is a cute land, and Slinky Dog is a lot of fun. But with all the money and time and political cachet they spent into Disneyland Forward, to go with something that, like, it's not ambitious, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you spent all this time doing this, let's get something really like big in there, you know? We'll see. But that's the thing too. It's like, it's weird, Danny, because it's like you were saying, and I think you're right. They have certain IPs and they know what park they want to go in. So assuming Pandora is going into DCA, it's like, that's a weird fit, right? Like, I mean, I guess with Hollywoodland, if that's where it goes, I guess it's kind of justified because it's Hollywoodland, it's a catch-all for everything. But if it goes over there in the Simba lot, how is that going to tie in? Or do you think they're going to change the park theme? And how's it going to work in there? Or do they not care?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Someone, I saw a couple people on Twitter. I think it was Jared, our friend Jared had mentioned it. A couple other people said it too, like changing the name of DCA to Disney's Cinematic Adventure.
Right.
And so it keeps the DCA moniker because people are like, you can't get rid of that. It's too iconic. It's too, people know it. So that could be something. I don't know, but I could see, then it makes sense that everything's about movies,
Right.
because that's kind of the way we're going right now. There's not really a lot of California in there anymore, so it's there vaguely in some aspects, but it doesn't. I don't necessarily know that it really makes sense to call it that anymore.
So if they change it, okay, let's say they do that, they rework the name. It's Disney Cinematic Adventure, which I like that because, like you said, you keep DCA. That's good. Now, though, it's interesting because now you have to go into like things like Soarin' and like insert IP to make it work, right? So that would kind of change the game a little bit for stuff like that. I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, who knows what the plans are for that either way. But I think the California Adventure name, I think eventually they'll want to change it. I just don't know what. And and with Avatar, it could fit in that area if you're using it as sort of like you're walking into, like, I think I was talking to Peter from Ordinary Adventures, and he said like positioning the entrance to the land as like a movie set, like building, which it already a movie studio building, which it already is, and then like having you walk into that as a portal and then walking out the other side into the set, which is like the movie. So that could work really well. But I don't really necessarily know that Disney truly cares all that much anymore about that kind of stuff, because my best example of that is like the transitions to Galaxy's Edge are so good in Frontierland, but they're not that good in Hollywood Studios. In fact, they don't even make sense.
Don't even get me started on that.
especially like Grand Avenue, like that transition is like it's like bizarre. I mean, at least Toy Story Land into Star Wars, like you're going from one movie to the next, so like you're going into these fantastical worlds, that makes sense. But like Grand Avenue, I don't even get that transition. So like I don't think they necessarily need to fit it in. I think they'll just put it in. It kind of seems like how they've been doing it lately.
Yeah, so I think you might be right on that. They might just put it in there and just like and call it a day,
Mm-hmm.
And DCA needs it so bad. Like Disneyland has gotten some pretty big stuff lately. I mean, just a few years ago, we got Galaxy's Edge. We just got the refreshing of Toontown with Mickey and Minnie's, and I think DCA needs, like you were saying, like a big family ride. Whether it be that Shanghai Pirates boat ride system or something else, but it needs it so bad. And the Avengers e-ticket, we need to finally get some closure on that. Like it's not going to happen, or announce it at D23 as to what we are getting with that. Cause that's been a big question mark for like 5 years now. I mean, do you think we're going to hear anything about that, Danny, at D23, or is that one, you think that's dead in the water?
I want it to be dead in the water, but I know that like there's so many people that want it. So I'm still of the mind that the Peter Pan attraction that we just saw debut in Tokyo is the exact ride system that we're getting for the Avengers e-ticket. The ride vehicles look almost identical from the little teaser that Disney gave us, with like the ride vehicle jumping into like the portal. So it looks like they'd probably use that, and it makes the most sense. But who knows? I love the way that Japan implemented it for Peter Pan. I think it's awesome. But I would imagine we'll probably hear, my predictions for D23 are probably Esplanade, like you said, in some aspect. Avengers attraction, because they can work on that like right away. And then the maybe like in the future, like Avatar, because they have to work on the parking first. So like but they show us like that concept art, and then they tell us like where it's going.
No, but you're right. You're going to have to address the parking situation first. Pixar structure took like like 2 years to build that. So, and this one will probably take even longer because there's more involved with going over harbor and all that good stuff. So yeah, you're looking at least 5 years until they can even put the shovel into the ground to start this thing, so I don't know. We'll see.
And it's kind of like with Disneyland, like as Danny said earlier, it's like a lot of people are, going to think, okay, they're going to go to D23, and it's like, okay, we're getting 5 new lands, 10 new rides, and it's like it's not going to be to that highest of you're going in there with very high expectations, and it's not what people are thinking it is. And right now, if anything, until they kind of get themselves unkinked, so to speak, with the rezoning, because they can't do nothing with expansions until they rezone.
Right.
But yet they're not going to want to touch anything already that's currently existing in the parks, because then you're then cutting more out of the day, that people are going to say, okay, well, I'm paying a high-end price for a day ticket, and I can't do X, Y, and Z because you have it closed down because we're getting something new, which is great, but they're not going to want to touch stuff that's existing in the parks until they actually get more stuff to do, which would be the expansion, but they can't do it until the Eastern Gateway. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. And it's kind of weird too, because everything that's kind of rumored for Disneyland expansion, and I'm curious your opinion on this, Danny, because it's like we're hearing that like maybe we'll get like Arendelle, right? Like from the one from Hong Kong, or maybe we'll get some version of like a Fantasy Springs, which honestly, at face value, I would be excited for those things to come here to California. My only issue with those things going into Disneyland, though, is it feels like, okay, if we get Arendelle or we get like a version of Fantasy Springs, maybe with like different IPs or what have you, it's likely going to go into that big expansion pad over there by the Stitch lot. I feel like it's weird, though, at Disneyland because you have Fantasyland, and then you have like another version of Fantasyland, like at the other end of the park. It feels a little redundant. Am I crazy, or do I have like OCD, or is that kind of weird?
Well, I mean, isn't that what New Fantasyland was, right? For Magic Kingdom? So it's like you had the old Fantasyland, and then you like go beyond the castle berm, and there's a second Fantasyland with like Little Mermaid, Snow White, all this kind of stuff. So kind of the same concept, maybe. But if they do it as sort of like a Fantasy Springs type of thing, it could work, where it's like this fanciful like area that you're going into that's like kind of a magical garden, essentially. It works in that aspect, I guess.
That's a good point. Now, there's a clause with Tokyo, right? Like we can't clone anything. George and I were talking about this in the video the other day. It's like, is it like a 5-year clause that you can't clone anything that they do in their park first, in any other park for like, was it 5 years?
Have we ever has anyone ever cloned anything from a Tokyo park?
And that's a good point too. Have they? I don't remember a single instance of that.
Yeah, like because like they have Pooh's Honey Hunt, which is still the best Winnie the Pooh attraction. They've got like their Tower of Terror is not the same. Like their Soarin' is like completely different, at least experientially. So I don't know. Like I don't know that any of our parks have anything cloned from them. I always thought that clause, the no copycat clause, was for only Shanghai.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
That makes sense. Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, but you're right though. I can't think of a single example of us copying them at all. Now they borrowed from us before, but we've never actually, unless there's something I'm missing. And in the comments, please, let us know. But I can't think of anything.
I'm trying to think even what we copied from any international park, really, except for Tron from Shanghai,
right?
Remy's Ratatouille Adventure from Disneyland Paris.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it?
I think it might be. Yeah, you're right. There isn't much.
I mean, I guess you could go as far as saying like Tokyo Disney really like pioneered trackless ride systems, starting off with like Winnie the Pooh's Honey Hunt, and then like all the other things that they had. And then we saw it at Hong Kong with like the Mystic Manor. And then, that was like, I remember for the longest time an OG, you might remember this, like as a Disney fan in like the early 2000s, we were always like, man, we just want like one of those cool trackless rides like Tokyo. We don't even have one of
Right.
those. And then like bam, all of a sudden we got like Rise of the Resistance. And so but I mean, yeah, I can't think of anything we copied. I know that like isn't Journey to the Center of the Earth like rocket rods, or is it like Test Track? I can't remember. I think it's Test Track, right?
I think so, but the vehicles look very rocket roddy.
Yeah.
Like Rocket Roddy.
They do. They
But
look very
yeah,
rocket roddy.
but then it kind of connects the vehicle onto like an actual like coaster track when you kind of shoot out of the volcano.
It's
After you
crazy.
see that like magma oversized creature looking thing.
The magma worm.
Yeah.
The magma worm. There you go. Yeah.
That's crazy. I want to ask you, Danny, too. Okay, so you've seen the pictures on Twitter, I'm sure, and stuff. Maybe you've even been to the park since then. Where at Grizzly Peak area, they have that big owl statue. Have you seen this thing?
I
Well,
have, but I need to remember, and I'm glad that you just brought that up because I'm going to the parks tomorrow, and I need to charge my Magic Band because I never charge it. I always just use the passive NFC functionality to just get in and out of the park, or use it for like Lightning Lane or something. So I need to actually remember to charge it because it interacts with not only Big Owl but like like the Pixar Fest stuff. So I haven't been able to do that. So, but yeah, I saw it in person, but I didn't have a Magic Band to like make it talk because I found out later that it talks when you have a Magic Band Plus near it. So
that's interesting. I did not know that. That's wild. Now, do you think because it's a nice structure? I mean, a nice little. I mean, it's not even little. It's kind of big actually, but like it's a nice statue and stuff. And George and I were kind of speculating a few videos ago. Like, do you think this is indicative of like a bigger Country Bear push in that Grizzly Peak area? Is it possible? Because here's our kind of going theory right now. It's like they're redoing the Country Bears at Magic Kingdom, right? And they're replacing a lot of the animatronics for the bears. And we know Disney likes to do these things like in bulk because it's cheaper. That's why we always get like 2 of everything. Is it possible because since they're already in there kind of reimagining the Country Bears over at Magic Kingdom that we might possibly get some animatronics for Country Bears, and maybe they'll put it in either in the attraction Grizzly River Run or maybe in the land somewhere as like a little show, and this statue is sort of indicative of more things to come, or do you think maybe we're reading a little too far into it?
I could see that, right? I could see them, doing like you said, buying more than one to save a little bit of money, and then giving them something to like showcase in some of those off years as we're waiting
Right.
for these bigger things to come, because Disney always likes to have at least something to push every year, right? So that could be that's a pretty good speculation, I would say. Either a quick little dirty trend like addition to like Grizzly River Run somehow, or even like the Redwood Creek Challenge Trail, maybe like
Right.
some animatronics. There is like a little mini theater there, so maybe they could do something like that over there.
Right. Yeah, it'd be kind of cool. I mean, and if they did it on Grizzly River Run, I mean, that would elevate that attraction so much to have music on there, and you're going through and in some of those caves, you got Big Al in there playing this little banjo or whatever. It could add a lot of charm, and the vibe would change completely. It'd be kind of cool, but we'll see. We'll see what ends up. I don't know. You think we'll get anything like these weird, crazy surprises at D23, like stuff that like they're just throwing at us like that we had no idea? You think there'll be any announcements like that at D23?
I don't know. I mean, that was Portos last time, and we haven't gotten it yet, and maybe we don't ever get it. So
Yeah,
I'm kind of like, and they've announced the Avengers attraction at 3 different D23s, and
right.
and it still hasn't happened either. So I don't like hold a lot of weight to like the surprise ones, and like more so like what can we count on specifically. But um I think George brought up the best point this whole episode is and it's something that kind of ties back to the Esplanade a little bit, but also to the main point is that truly Disney is trying to transition in the best way they can Disneyland Resort into a full vacation destination. And it's very evident with the amount of money that's being spent on building these Disney Vacation Club kiosks. They're putting money into them. Like they're not just like throwing up some signage on a cart like they used to have. Like they're like putting these statues. They've built out another one in Tomorrowland with like a statue for Mission Space and like all this stuff that, they've got the new lounge in Tomorrowland, and they're building that whatever it's going to look like over there in the wine country area of DCA for their sales welcome center that they're building right now. So there's definitely a push, and I feel like all the hotels that we see announced new for Disneyland, they're probably all going to be DVC. So we're going to see more changes that are going to cater towards the vacation guest, truly than actually like the annual pass holders, because that's where they want to be. They want to make Disneyland a place where people are booking 4 or 5 day trips, because right now you see the weekends like the max. That's what you see at Disneyland. Is like the weekenders is what they, the Fridays to Monday, check out Monday.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. They definitely are going in that tourism direction. They don't want to abandon the locals, but they definitely want more tourism coming to the resort. And I understand that. Tourists spend a lot of money. Now that kind of brings me, and we've talked about this a lot on the channel, but like that Toy Story lot, which is part of this whole Disneyland Forward thing, with the push for more tourism, do you think in maybe 15, 20 years that becomes a third gate to kind of really ramp up those hotel stays and what have you? Or do you think that that's kind of a pipe dream?
I say it's got to be something big as a tourist destination, right? Either like a really nice shopping center or a third park. I think a water park would do well, but I don't know that necessarily want to use that space for that. But I feel like a third gate is probably the thing that makes the most sense there, in my opinion. Like, why use all that space for anything but that?
Yeah. Do you eventually see Disney purchasing Garden Walk?
If I don't, I could have sworn like someone said they did already. Like they already have it, but they like can't use it for like how they want or something like that. But if they could and they could use it, oh yeah, for sure.
Because that could be kind of like the connector between this third park and the Toy Story lot to the resort. That'd be kind of interesting, And that thing has been like rumored for so long. I mean, I remember hearing about that for years and years and years. And that mall is really dying on the vine. Garden Walk. I mean, it's struggling.
What if all we need is just a Skyliner to get from that park to the resort?
There you go. Exactly. I'm claustrophobic, so I'll probably be walking, but I'll meet you guys over there. George, what are your thoughts on D23? I know because D23 is a sensitive subject for George. He you had a little bit of a ticket issue.
Yes, very very much so. But I am very optimistic. I'm very curious of what they're going to announce. As I said, I don't have high expectations of like what they're actually going to announce specifically for Disneyland Forward. I feel like if we're going to still get anything of like this what if, shoulda, coulda, woulda kind of thing, it's going to come. It's good, but I do feel like it may come with Disneyland Forward. And this is where DeMauro kind of shot himself in the foot, because he shouldn't have utilized that notion the last 3 years. He should be doing it now with the Disneyland Forward, and it wouldn't be too much of a big impact, because it's like, hey, this is what we could be doing
right
with Disneyland Forward. But now if he tries to do that, it's now all going to be in vain in a sense, because it's like that's always his scapegoat. Right. It's like, well, what if we did this? Oh, we could do that. And especially since he did that with Walt Disney World, that should have been, especially when Walt Disney World has the quote unquote blessing of size, and you're going to kind of throw it out there to say, oh, well, we could do this. We could do that. You took out one of the most greatest attractions in a park, the great movie ride. And I honestly, I'm still very bitter about that. And they put in Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, which is a great ride, but they did not have to take out the great movie ride to do that.
Yeah. Well,
And
that
especially
surprised
with
me.
with the acquisition with Fox of how
Right.
much IP that they could have put in that thing.
That's why it surprised me because like they're all about the IP, right? So you could swap those franchises out. I mean, you know, it's animatronic heavy, so obviously you couldn't do it like every year or anything like that. But every 5 to 10 years, you can change those scenes. And like you said, George, they have Fox now, so you can do those Fox movies and things like that. I'm surprised they made that move. I really am, and especially for a park like Hollywood Studios that really needs more attractions. To eliminate any of them and just to replace, it's kind of a wash, you know.
Yeah.
So
So I personally feel, and again, Demaro has to kind of maneuver himself in the position that he's in right now, because I feel like with Disneyland Forward, we are going to get the what ifs and the possibilities and the maybes, because we're not in the situation where it's like, okay, yeah, we could start breaking ground tomorrow on Wakanda or Pandora or Zootopia or Arendelle. They can't do that yet.
right.
So I can understand it if he was to say, okay, for Disneyland Forward or whatever, as Danny had mentioned, Disneyland Forward was basically just a gimmick name, just to kind of get the city of
The
Anaheim to
zoning.
say the kind of rezone. So now they
Yeah.
may come up with a new name of what this whole project is going to be. But I could understand it, but I don't know how much the broadness of the Disney community
It
is going to
wouldn't
take to that, because he used that so many times.
it wouldn't go over well with the Disney community because you're right. He's gone to that well too many times. And then also right now, it's very important for him to really hit a home run because he's on the short list for CEO. So if he goes in there and the fan perception is that this expo was a flop, that doesn't look good for him. And right now he can't afford to have a moment like that. Like he has to get an A+ because he's going for Iger's job right now. He wants that spot,
Not to mention for those people that paid $2,700 for a front row seat. It's like
It's tough. It's tough. Are you going to the expo, Danny? Are you guys going over? Are you guys going to head over there?
I am, yeah. Mondo is not going, so.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
he didn't want to go. He's kind of been burned out over D23. It's hard to hear an announcement where they share something like the Avengers e-ticket, and like they show you a version of it, and then they cancel that version, but they don't tell you it's canceled, and they just show you another version of it, and it's totally different. It's not about the Queen, it's about Thanos, and it looks like a boat. And then the next time they show it to you, now it's like a flying ride vehicle. So it's like it's like these what ifs. Like last time we got like, oh, Beyond Big Thunder, like this is what could be, and then we got Portos, and still none of that has come true. So um, so it's kind of, for him, he's a little like, I'd rather just I have just fun of a time watching the presentation from their live stream. He's like, I don't really want to spend the money to
Yeah.
do that. So I think that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I just like I've been to every D23 Expo, so I don't want to break. So I'm gonna go to this one. So and I'm excited to see what they announce. I'm sure there'll be at least something that's quantifiable. But I think like you're right. This is his moment. We can't hear the what ifs. I think people are just going to be really upset about that. And for his public persona, and like you said, he's got to win over the crowd. It's not going to look good. And regardless of whether or not they want fans to like it on social media, they still have to appease them in some way, because they're going to reflect and change the way it's being talked out online. And then there could be news stories on that, like people aren't happy, and then that could reflect like the stock price. So you never know. Like they have to have something. He has to be able to showcase something that they can build and that they're going to build, because pretty much everything that they've showcased that they're going to build, whether it's Epcot, which that's a whole other story, or all the stuff they shared for Disneyland, like none of it's actually happened. And sure, we've had the pandemic in between now and then, but like Universal's not using that excuse. So
Yeah.
and that is true, Danny,
they've got it.
because
This is their show up moment.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
true. And you made some great points right now, even when you said, it could affect the stock. I mean, even just this last quarterly earnings, Iger made the one statement, or I don't know if it was Iger or if it was Hugh, that said, the summer months may see a slump in the parks.
Right.
And I think that was a big boo-boo on their behalf. And it's like, I would have reworded that, kind of differently, or not say nothing at all. Because
Yeah.
that's probably not the thing to say right now, especially when you're trying to get yourself kind of up. And then, yeah, they kind of use the notion of like the pandemic and the shutdown. And I get it. There are companies out there that are still kind of, trying to get, out of that funk from 2020. But you're right. It's like they can't utilize that as an excuse for every obstacle now that they're kind of maneuvering, because we're now going almost, no, 5 years out. It's like you have to kind of move on and say, what,
Right.
this isn't working because of X, Y, and Z. You can't go back 4 or 5 years and say, well, it's because of the pandemic, it was because of the shutdown. Yes, to an extent, but it's like at some point you have to kind of move off that drawbridge, so to speak.
Well, yeah, and Danny, you're right too. Also with Universal, I think they have a really good approach with how they kind of handle these announcements. Like they will just start building something. They'll be like 70% through a project, and then they announce it, right? So there's none of this like if stuff. Like it's like no, it's already being built. Like we've been watching the construction for the Fast and Furious coaster over there at Hollywood, at Universal Hollywood. It's been no secret that that's what that coaster is, and they just announced it like last week or something. I think it was. Like that's how they do things, But I think at the end of the day, though, I think it makes the fans less upset than what the way Disney does it, which is like Disney. What they'll do is they'll have these big expos. They'll announce a bunch of things, but then things happen, right? Which we get it, but it's disappointing. Like the pandemic, this, that, and the other, and then these things that they promised and they got all these fans excited for is now they're canceled, or they don't even officially cancel them, and they just don't say anything. They don't bring it up ever again. There's like no closure.
Once in a while, I would love Disney to kind of take that approach of Universal, because I think that would be kind of interesting to kind of see Disney put up these construction walls and you see this big, massive show building or this track being built. And you're just like, wait, I don't remember Disney mentioning anything. Like, what could this possibly be?
Right.
And then like after like they kind of throw some hints, some Easter eggs, and then they make the announcement at the expo. Then at least we know, hey, whatever they're showing us is true because it's over 50% done. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a smart move. I think Universal has been smarter with a lot of the PR stuff. We talked a lot about it in the past with like in many videos about how Disney kind of drops the ball a lot with their PR. They sort of set themselves up for like these kind of moments. And like you were saying, Danny, like with Mondo, like he's gone to a lot of these and they'll announce these projects and then they'll cancel them and like bums them out. And I completely understand where it's coming from with that, because it's like, as a diehard Disney fan, we get excited for this stuff, it's awesome. And then,
Yeah,
and then,
I mean, if
and
you're
then,
gonna,
yeah, go
I
ahead. I'm
was gonna
sorry.
say, if you're like what George was saying, like if you're gonna spend $700 on one experience of a show, and the last 3 times that you went to the expo, all the things that were announced either were massively changed or just never happened. You would like, what's the incentive to spend another $700 to do it again? So like it's they have to, and now that the whole company's entire revenue structure has shifted because of how bad Disney Plus is doing. And now Disney Parks is what's their main source of revenue, which is so bizarre to me. Because when I was a cast member, it was like one movie would come out, like one Pirates of the Caribbean would come out, and it would make in one opening like release make as much revenue as Parks did for the whole year. And like it's so weird to now see Parks be like the main source of revenue. And so like if now that's your main source of revenue, well, the fans that care about that, like they have a voice, and it matters. So if you're not going to show up and do things that they want, then people are going to stop caring. So I do think this is a make or break moment for them for sure in a lot of ways. And I'm not trying to be like negative on Disney. Like I've always loved the expos. Either way, they're really fun to
Yeah.
attend. The community's all there. It's really fun, like a great experience. Um, I just think that they have gone, especially Imagineering and especially people like Bruce Vaughan.
Yeah.
They don't like criticism, and they don't like to think that the fans should have any say in what they're doing. Like, they think they know the best answer for everything, and like they're the best creative house that ever was. And like that may be true in a lot of aspects, but I think maybe it's time to take a step back and be a little humble for a moment,
Yeah.
and then be like, hey, let's really take into consideration what these people are saying, and let's really deliver a great experience. And I think Oriental Land Company managing the Tokyo Disney Resort is a perfect example of that, right? They did some extensive market research to realize what IPs would work in their parks and cause the most like success for them, and that's why they chose what they chose. And so those are the IPs that will do what, I mean, they love Peter Pan, like love Peter Pan.
Wow.
So it makes sense.
That's wild. Yeah, I mean, it's a 70-year-old franchise, and I guess like you were saying, it's big. It's big in Japan. It's in that Japanese culture. But the thing I love about Peter Pan, though, is it really is sort of like the quintessential sort of fantasy adventure. It's so Disney in so many ways, and I just love what they did with it, with the Neverland, with this little with the mountains and the clouds. It looks absolutely beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But you're right, though. I mean, I think they need to eat a little humble pie, as they say, and start listening to fans a little more. Now, you don't want to be super reactive, but at the same time, you want to open up a little bit more. You want to hear people out, and it could go a long way. It absolutely could go a long way. What do you think about that, George? Do you think that they should sort of, listen to fans a little more than they do right now, instead of being so?
Yeah, I think everything that Danny had mentioned, I feel Disney needs to kind of take that approach, because as he said, the parks right now is their bread and butter.
Right.
Right now the studio's not so hot. Disney Plus isn't where
They want
it needs to be at this current moment. I do feel like eventually it will be,
Yeah.
but there you can't. There's nothing they can do about it right now. So they have to focus on what is working for them. And right now, the parks is what's doing it. And they can't just rely on their laurels and say, you know what, we're the Walt Disney Company. No matter what, it's going to work out. You have to kind of really like stop and sit back and say, okay, we have to think strategically of what we can do. And obviously, things we have done in the past hasn't worked. So what can we do now to kind of change some things to get it back on track?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. And you did say track, George, and when you say track.
Oh no! I must have hit that track switch!
There we go. Track switch. But Danny, thank you so much for coming on today and talking Disneyland Forward, Esplanade, the future of the resort. Really, really good time. And as always, you're always welcome to come back on and talk shop with us. We always have a really good time chatting with you. And it was great talking to you at the parks a couple weeks ago. It was fun running into you.
Yeah, next time we'll have to, like I said, plan a full day, like kind of hangout situation for sure. But yeah, I love being on the show, and I would love to come back and talk more. Right as we get closer to D23, I think we're gonna hear like a lot more rumors. It's kind of like getting closer to an Apple event. Like, people have rumors that like what's gonna come out. So.
Exactly. Well, one rumor that we haven't heard come about this time around yet, and it happens every D23, but this time I haven't really heard anything, is Tomorrowland. It's kind of funny because I always hear Tomorrowland rumors, but this time I'm not really hearing much Tomorrowland rumors, which is funny because usually we hear Tomorrowland rumors and then Tomorrowland never comes. So maybe this time, since we're not hearing it, it will. We'll see. It'll be the opposite.
Yeah.
We'll see. But Danny, if you could let everybody at home know if you could remind everybody where they could find you on social media.
Yeah. I'm basically Just Ask Danny on all social media platforms, YouTube, X, Instagram, etc. And then I also have a podcast called The 5571.
Perfect. And I will be linking all of those down in the description. So make sure you follow and subscribe to Danny. And George the Italiano, if you could let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media.
You can find me on social media on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you can find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There it is. There it is. And comment down below, everybody, with all your thoughts on everything we discussed today. Disneyland Forward, D23, the Esplanade. That's something that Disney really needs to address. It is kind of the elephant in the room. Do you think they will announce it at D23? Possible, maybe. Comment down below. We would love to hear from you. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye, everybody.